Imagine this. You sit down at your desk, you open your laptop, the task you know you need to do is right in front of you. Maybe it's that report, maybe it's replying to an important email, maybe it's starting a project that's been hanging over your head for weeks. And yet, instead of doing it, your hand drifts to your phone. You open social media, you check notifications, you read something completely irrelevant. 10 minutes pass, then 20, and suddenly an hour is gone. The deadline hasn't moved, the work hasn't been touched, but the weight pressing on your chest feels heavier. And in that moment, you say to yourself, why am I like this? Why can't I just start? If you've ever had that thought, you're not broken. You're human. And procrastination isn't a sign of laziness. It's a signal that your brain is stuck in a loop it doesn't know how to break. But what if I told you that breaking this loop could come down to asking yourself a single simple question? Not a complicated system, not a 10-step plan, not a productivity app, but just one question that flips the way your brain is framing the task. The truth is, procrastination isn't about time management. It's about emotional management. When you avoid a task, you're not avoiding the task itself. You're avoiding the uncomfortable emotions attached to it. Maybe it feels too big. Maybe it feels boring. Maybe it feels like you might fail. Your brain, trying to protect you from discomfort, whispers, let's do it later. Let's just check something else for now. And in that moment, avoidance wins. But here's where the power of one question comes in. Instead of wrestling with your entire to-do list or beating yourself up for not starting, you give your brain a small, clear pivot point. That question is this: what would happen if I did this right now? It sounds almost too simple, but let me explain why it works. When you ask this, you're forcing your brain to stop spinning in the abstract and confront the immediate reality of action. Instead of focusing on how big or how unpleasant the task might feel, you're shifting attention to the direct consequence of just beginning. Suddenly, it's no longer about the weight of the whole project. It's about this moment, this action, this choice, and neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that the hardest part of starting a task isn't the task itself. It's the transition from inaction to action. That first step is where resistance is the strongest. But once momentum begins, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical that fuels motivation. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. And the beauty of the question, what would happen if I did this right now, is that it makes that first step vivid, tangible, and unavoidable. For example, imagine you need to write that dreaded report. Instead of saying, I have to finish the entire thing today, you pause and ask, what would happen if I opened the document right now and wrote just one sentence? Immediately, the pressure shifts. You're not facing the mountain, you're taking a step onto the trail. And once you take that step, the brain begins to cooperate. The resistance starts to melt. This question is powerful because it cuts through the fog of procrastination in 3 key ways. First, it breaks the illusion of later. When you procrastinate, your brain convinces you there's a magical future version of you who will somehow have more energy, more discipline, more time. But that future doesn't exist. There's only now. Asking, what would happen if I did this right now, snaps you out of the fantasy of tomorrow and places you back in the reality of today. Second, it reframes the task as manageable. Instead of confronting the giant, overwhelming, I have to finish everything, you're simply experimenting with the start. The brain can handle beginnings much more easily than it can handle abstractions like finish. And third, it creates curiosity instead of pressure. Think about it. The question isn't, I must do this now. It's what would happen if. That tiny shift makes it playful, almost like a challenge. Your brain becomes intrigued. Let's just see. And that spark of curiosity is often enough to get you moving. Let's bring this to life with an example you can try right now. Think of something you've been putting off. It could be as small as sending a message, or as big as working on a long-term project. Now pause and silently ask yourself, what would happen if I did this right now? Notice what changes. You'll feel your mind trying to resist, to argue, to suggest you delay again. But behind that resistance, there's also a small opening. A thought that says, maybe I can. Maybe I could just start. And in that opening lies the end of procrastination's grip. Here's where it gets even more interesting. That single question doesn't just help you start. It can reshape the way you relate to your tasks entirely. Because once you begin using it regularly, your brain starts to associate tasks not with dread, but with possibility. The question becomes a trigger, a mental switch. Over time, this creates a habit loop. Instead of task avoidance, Your pattern becomes task, question, action. And when action becomes your default, procrastination has no oxygen left to survive. But let's go even deeper. Why is it that this one question works better than simply telling yourself, I have to do it now? The answer is tied to how the brain responds to autonomy. Psychological studies show that humans resist being forced, even by themselves. When you tell yourself, I must, your brain instinctively rebels. It feels like a loss of freedom. But when you frame it as a question, you invite choice. You give yourself agency. And agency is the key to intrinsic motivation. That's why people who ask themselves empowering questions, like, what can I do right now to make progress, are more likely to follow through than those who use self-commands like, I need to, or I should. By asking, what would happen if I did this right now, you're not ordering yourself. You're opening a door, and doors are easier to walk through than walls. Imagine applying this not just to work, but to life. You wake up feeling sluggish. What would happen if I went for a 5-minute walk right now? You see dishes piling up. What would happen if I washed one plate right now? You dread calling someone back. What would happen if I dialed the number right now? Each time the resistance shrinks, the action grows, and the result compounds. Tiny moments build momentum. Momentum builds identity, and identity builds a new reality. Because when you consistently act in the present, you start to see yourself not as a procrastinator, but as someone who moves forward, who acts, who chooses. And that shift in identity is the ultimate cure. Think about it this way. Procrastination thrives on vagueness. It lives in the fog of later, in the haze of I'll get to it. But clarity kills procrastination. And nothing creates clarity faster than a direct, piercing question about this moment. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you feel yourself slipping into avoidance, don't try to motivate yourself with guilt or force. Don't wait for inspiration to magically appear. Instead, stop, breathe, and ask, what would happen if I did this right now? Then watch what happens next. You might surprise yourself, because often what happens isn't as scary as your brain predicted. Often what happens is that the task begins, momentum builds, and relief follows. You feel lighter, freer, more in control, and you realize the monster of procrastination was never as big as it seemed. It was just smoke, and one good question is enough to clear the air. Now you may be wondering, how do you make sure this isn't just a nice idea you forget tomorrow? How do you turn this into something that actually reshapes your day-to-day life? The answer lies in repetition and anchoring. If you only use this question once in a while, it won't have time to sink in. But if you repeat it in the key moments, each time procrastination whispers, you begin to train your brain to respond automatically. To make it even stronger, pair the question with a physical anchor. For example, every time you ask yourself, what would happen if I did this right now? Snap your fingers, or take a deep breath, or tap your desk. That physical cue reinforces the mental shift. Over time, your brain learns, when the cue happens, action follows. This is how you hardwire the anti-procrastination reflex. Think of it like building a muscle. The first few times it feels awkward, even weak. But with practice, the muscle grows. And soon, what once felt impossible becomes automatic. And the best part is, you don't need months to feel it. The first time you use this question intentionally, you'll notice the difference immediately. It's that fast. It's that powerful. Now let's expand on how to apply this in your daily life so it doesn't just remain an inspiring idea, but becomes a permanent shift. The first step is awareness. Most procrastination happens on autopilot. You don't even realize you're delaying until you're already deep in distraction. So the key is to catch the moment earlier. Notice the sensation in your body when you're about to avoid something. Maybe it's a heaviness in your chest. Maybe a restless scrolling urge. Maybe a sudden desire to tidy your desk instead of opening the file. That's the signal. As soon as you notice it, pause, breathe, and ask, what would happen if I did this right now? The second step is lowering the barrier. Often we procrastinate because our brain exaggerates the cost of starting. It imagines hours of hard work, the possibility of mistakes, or endless effort. But if you attach the question to the smallest possible action, what would happen if I wrote just one sentence right now? What would happen if I sent just one line in this email? You shrink the resistance dramatically. Your brain thinks, I can handle that. And once you start, the magic of momentum takes over. The third step is reflection. At the end of the day, look back and notice the times you used the question. Ask yourself, what actually happened when I took action right away? Most of the time, you'll realize it was easier than you feared. That reflection strengthens the link in your mind. Question equals relief. Question equals progress. Over time, this rewires your brain to associate starting with ease instead of pain. But let's go even deeper into why this method is so transformative. It's not just about beating procrastination in the moment, it's about reshaping your identity. Every time you ask, what would happen if I did this right now? And then follow through, you are casting a vote for the kind of person you are. You're no longer the person who avoids, who delays, who waits for the mythical perfect time. You're becoming the person who acts, who experiments, who moves forward. And identity is the strongest driver of behavior. When you see yourself as someone who starts, procrastination loses its power. Let's play this out in a real scenario. Imagine it's evening and you told yourself you'd go to the gym, but now you're tired, the couch looks tempting, and you're ready to say, I'll go tomorrow. Pause. Ask, what would happen if I put on my shoes right now? You don't have to commit to a full workout, just shoes. You put them on, and suddenly the gym feels closer. Next question, what would happen if I walked out the door right now? Step by step, the resistance fades, and before you know it, you're in motion. Or picture this at work. A big presentation is due next week. The thought of creating it feels overwhelming, so you keep pushing it aside. But then you ask, what would happen if I opened a blank slide right now and wrote the title? Just the title. You do it, and now the project exists. It's no longer a looming shadow. It's something real, something started. That single question was the bridge between paralysis and progress. There's also a deeper psychological reason why this works. It taps into the brain's reward system. Procrastination hijacks your reward circuits by giving you a quick hit of pleasure through distraction. But by reframing the task as a small immediate action, you allow your brain to experience a reward from progress itself. And progress creates dopamine just like scrolling does, but with the added benefit of building your future instead of draining it. This is why asking the question regularly not only helps you start, but makes starting feel good. And the more you feel that reward, the more your brain craves it. Soon, taking action becomes addictive in the best way. But here's something even more powerful. This question is universal. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with work, health, relationships, or personal goals. The mechanism is the same. Avoidance thrives on delay. Action dissolves delay. And this question is the spark that lights action. Think of it as your mental switch. You can use it anywhere, anytime. You don't need tools, timers, or apps. Just a few words whispered to yourself. What would happen if I did this right now? And that question alone can flip the entire trajectory of your day. Now I want you to imagine how different your life could look if you practiced this consistently. Imagine your mornings where tasks don't pile up but actually get started the moment they appear. Imagine projects that don't drag on for weeks but move forward in small, steady steps. Imagine evenings where you feel light, free, because you're not haunted by the things you avoided. That's not a fantasy. That's the life waiting for you if you train this one habit. And it all begins with the courage to ask a question in the moment when you'd normally avoid. So here's my invitation. The next time you catch yourself drifting, don't scold yourself. Don't say, I should be better. Just stop, breathe, and ask, what would happen if I did this right now? And then act on the answer. Because what happens isn't just progress on a task. What happens is a shift in who you are. What happens is freedom from the invisible weight of avoidance. What happens is that you take control of your life, one choice at a time. And that's the real secret. Procrastination doesn't end with discipline or force. It ends with awareness, choice, and the courage to act in the present. One question, one action, one new identity, starting now. So try it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment. Look at the task you've been delaying. Ask yourself the question and see what unfolds. You may discover that the life you want isn't waiting for you in some distant future. It's waiting for you in the choice you make right now.